Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Thought Leadership Track, sponsored by Nomura. The session will be starting momentarily. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our session, Reinventing Broadcasting, sponsored by TV News Check. Here is our moderator, editor TV News Check, Harry Jessel.
Not just yet. Small intro from his business partner, Kathy Haley. Hi, I'm Kathy Haley, one of the founders of TVNewscheck.com and its sister news website, NetNewscheck.com. TV News Check brings you continuously updated business news about the TV industry 24/7. We're celebrating our 5th anniversary this week with record revenues and record readership. Net News Check covers the local digital media arena where newspapers, TV stations, radio stations, and internet pure plays compete for the attention of consumers and advertisers. If you want to know about paywalls, monetizing mobile, daily deals, and hyper-local news, read netnewscheck.com. It's easy to find. We wanted to make this event a gathering place for broadcasters here at NATPE, so immediately following this, we're having a quiet little cocktail reception in that room right in the back. We'll remind you at the end. Our co-sponsor for the reception is RentTrack, a company that's been in the headlines a lot the last couple of years as they try to transform the audience measurement arena by harnessing the power of set-top boxes, data. Moderating our panel of distinguished broadcast TV executives today is Harry Jessel, co-founder of Net News Check Media and editor of TVNewscheck.com. Harry has covered the TV industry for more than 30 years. He began his career covering cable TV, technology, and Washington's regulatory scene, and served as editor of B&C for 8 years before launching TV News Check. It's been tough putting up with Harry since the Wall Street Journal called him the invaluable Harry Jessel. And then
That's
the Steelers got in the Super Bowl. But even so, he's the best business partner in the world and the best editor. Harry.
Thank you, Kathy. It's great to be here and great to be in this new venue. It's much better, I think, than Mandalay Bay. I think most people would agree with me. I gave John Nagowski at CBS Television Distribution the prize for the best booth. It was outside. It was in a cabana, and you didn't have to go 23 floors to get there. But maybe the weather, I have to take that back if the weather doesn't improve. Kathy and I, as Kathy said, we had hoped to bring all the broadcasters together in one place, and I think looking out here, I see a lot of faces that I know, so I think we've been fairly successful in doing that. Today we have 4 top executives, station group executives, who collectively operate more than 6 dozen stations, mostly affiliates of the big 3 networks. Any Fox affiliates here? One? So we're covered in terms of affiliation. They are traditional broadcasters with long histories in the business and reputations for doing things, doing news and everything well. Great reputations. So let me introduce them quickly. On my far left, Alan Frank, Post Newsweek Stations, Dave Luigi, Gannett Broadcasting, Colleen Brown, Fisher Broadcasting, Fisher Communications CEO, and David Barrett of Hearst Television. In the news is Comcast NBC. Round of applause. In the news is NBC. Comcast deal was approved last week. It's supposed to go to closing this week. So I just want to go down the road, starting with Alan. Give us your impressions of this deal, how it's going to affect the broadcasting business.
I think it's a good deal. I think it'll be good for broadcasting. I think Comcast is going to reinvigorate NBC. For those of us who have NBC affiliates, of which we do, we're looking forward to what they're going to bring. Steve Burke, many of us know, he's quality, great guy, and we have great hopes that this will be good for broadcasting.
Because it's going to improve the network? I mean, you're a big NBC affiliate, right? Two NBC affiliates?
And the affiliate groups, the NBC affiliate group and the other affiliate groups all went to the FCC, worked with Comcast on protections in the deal, and those are all built into the agreement. And so we feel comfortable going forward that this is going to be good for broadcasting.
Dave?
Yeah, I would agree with most of what Alan said, that I think Steve Burke is going to be key. At the end of the day, he's got broadcasting in his genes. Obviously, the most upside is on the network side. I mean, there's been a reallocation of resources over the years from broadcast to cable, and I think now through retrans and other opportunities, I think the focus is going to be on the network. I think he's going to be very focused on prime time, which is really, the missing piece there. Sports and news are working very well at NBC. So I think.
Have you actually heard from these people? I mean, the new gang.
We feel good about what they'll be doing.
Oh, you have heard from them. How about you, Colleen?
We don't have any NBC affiliates, so I come at it from a little bit
Do you have any concern? I think this came up in some of these affiliate agreements, of Comcast sort of ganging up with the NBC O&O or the NBC affiliate in any of your markets and going after you in local sales or cross promotion or any of that stuff?
Well, first of all, I think it's important that any of us in broadcasting understand that competition's part of the fun. So that shouldn't.
Is it really?
It is. It shouldn't derail us. I think it makes for better television. But coming back to the question, I think that the devil's going to be in how it plays out. I do trust Steve Burke as an individual. I do believe that there's going to be a lot of experimentation going on between NBC and Comcast assets, which could be good for the business, and I'd like to see what that is.
But not necessarily but what I'm getting at, not necessarily the other affiliates in the market that aren't part of the club, right?
Could be. Yeah. I don't know. It could lead the way, or it could be, not good. I don't know. And the real question is how all of this is implemented once they actively take hold.
How about you, Dave?
I too am optimistic that NBC will be a better company under Steve Burke's leadership and Comcast stewardship, and particularly the change of personalities and management in LA is going to be very important to the network. But Steve is, I think, got it in his DNA. He understands what it takes to run good stations and run a good network, and the proof will be in the pudding, but I'm optimistic that new leadership is desperately needed at NBC.
Well, any of these concerns about local market in your non-NBC markets?
There's a concern. All of these things are imperfect, and one had to weigh the pros and cons of Comcast taking over this network. And at the end of the day, I come out on the side that they'll be a good steward. But as NBC affiliates and as ABC, CBS, and Fox affiliates, we arrived at an understanding with Comcast and NBC and with the FCC, and to an extent, good treaties make good friends, and I think we put on the table all of these issues, and there's an element of trust at the moment.
The name of this panel is Reinventing Broadcasting, so let's get to that. What is the most, and again, we'll start down there with Alan, what is the most important investment you will make this year in an effort to boost future revenue?
I think that television is we had a better year last year than a lot of people thought we would. And I believe that television has been undervalued, and local television has been particularly undervalued. And that's been true for a while. And I think the reason that we had a better year and we're going to have a good year in the future, good years in the future, is people came back to us, advertisers came back to us, not because we're nice guys, nice people. We are nice people, but that's not why. Is we deliver. We help to sell products. We work hard in our communities. We help retailers. We help people sell what their wares, and it's a great environment for them. And no one does it like television. No one sells emotion like we do. Some of the other media, the internet has had a big influence, but what advertisers have found is working with local television on the internet, on other ways, on social media, it makes everything better. And so I think our future is quite bright. I think our track record of helping people succeed is really strong. And if anything, we're undervalued in local television.
Well, okay, but look, there's new things. What are you doing new? Are you putting? We hope the business comes back. And matter of fact, Marcus gave 5, and we might get to it later. Gave 5 good reasons why he thinks this industry really does have a bright future. But what are you doing new? Where's the investment coming from? Or where is it going?
Our biggest investment is locally, and what we have to do is what the smart retailers are doing. The people who are succeeding are people who aren't operating like they did 5 years ago, 10 years ago. They're finding different ways and new ways to do things. What we've invested our time in is a lot of new projects, new ways of looking at things. I'll give you a simple answer to that too, is job classifications. One of the things that stands in the way is old ways of talking about what people do. Your job, 10 years ago, I'm going to bet how you run your day now, and I don't know this answer, but I'm going to bet the way you operate today is remarkably different than you did 10 years ago. And the people who work for you, the size of your staff, what you're able to accomplish, how you do it. It's not that you're less effective. You might be more effective, but you operate differently. I think the companies that recognize that are the ones that are moving forward aggressively. Job classification sometimes. We used to talk about, and this is a longer answer than you want, I'm sorry, but we used to talk about things like one-man bands, and it was always a negative. It was always a terrible thing. It was always ripping the heart out of journalism. In fact, every kid comes out of high school, much less college, knowing how to edit on Final Cut, knowing how to shoot, knowing how to write, and they go to stations and we say, no, you only have to do one thing. The new title is Mojos, Mobile Journalists. And we have some of the best journalism coming out of Mojos in markets across the country.
So they're coming in with these skills.
And they know how to deliver things in a way that gets the best out of them. It makes our news product better. It makes our on-air product better. And in fact, then, everyone's more productive, but people are able to do more what they want to do. They feel better about their days. We feel better about what they bring. You have to look at getting the most out of people and making them productive and helping them be as good as they can be. Old job descriptions get in the way.
Well, let's move to Mr. Luigi and ask hard investment, dollars into the business. What are you doing this year to create a new business for yourself or expand a revenue stream?
Well, I think first of all, I think the most important things we're doing, to Alan's point, as it relates to resources, is not about throwing a couple of $100 million of new capital in. You don't need to at this day and age. The biggest return on investment we can get is how we allocate resources. This industry still doesn't really allocate resources the way that if you were starting a property today, you would allocate. We've made, I think some companies have been very innovative in that space. 2009 created, I think, some real initiatives around that. But we can have a lot more content, in our core products with our current resource base. So I think allocating resources in our core, number one. And then number two, I think what we'll be doing is we're going to be investing a lot of time on our people around social media. And that's a catchphrase for a lot of people. But when you look at some of the I heard somewhere that a quarter of all page views in America in December were on Facebook. The Fox folks, I know Greg Meidels out here was telling us that how much traffic Glee is spawning on Facebook. There's an enormous opportunity for all of us in sales and in content and in programming to take advantage of this fact that, I think the Nielsen figures are 65% of all of our audience has a device with a return path within a couple feet of them when they're watching us. And we're calling that the fourth medium. The fourth, neither mobile, online, or television. And we're going to invest a lot internally, both in bringing some people in from the outside and in developing our people and creating content and sales solutions around that.
How about you, Colleen?
Pardon me?
I'm Colleen. I'm moving here.
Well, I'm not going to echo what Alan and Dave said, because in I think all of us are reinvesting and trying to identify cultural changes that enable us to do what we need to do to adapt and to reinvent local media. One thing I do believe is anywhere technology can replace human hands and it's more efficient, that doesn't mean people lose their jobs. It just means there's a better way to do it. I encourage us to do it, and I try to figure out how can we implement that so that we can have more minds on the product and more thinking going on rather than just the routine getting the product out the door. So that's one element, whether or not it's software or any kind of tool that enables you to do more with less. I'm very interested in that. The second thing is, many of you know, we're very interested in hyperlocal. I believe, and our team at Fisher believes, that from the grassroots up, you create an incredible, very sticky relationship with your neighborhoods and literally corners, street corners and streets in your neighborhood, in coverage, in relationships, with vendors, with advertisers. It really changes how you look at your business and how you serve your community. So we are investing in hyperlocal products and
online products.
Online hyperlocal, who knows? It could go on from there, that it's not just online. But I do believe that it makes for an almost impenetrable relationship with your consumers. And, you know, I think it's something all of us know well, and that's our marketplaces. So any way you can invest in covering those stories and still make it meaningful, which is always very difficult because, you know, you really are talking couples of thousands of dollars. How do you rationalize it? But when you roll it all together, it ends up being significant enough to pay attention to. So anything that allows us better coverage, more thought about the markets we are covering and serving, bubbles up to, I think, better product, and so we're investing in that.
Mr. Barrett.
Our capital investment really follows on to the strategy to try and be a leader on air, online, and on the move. We are investing in news gathering resources we call next generation news tools that we're equipping all of our stations with. Apropos to what Alan said, we're still building out high definition local news production, and there is not an insignificant amount of money attached to that, a not insignificant amount of money. We're investing in mobile, which we think is very important. We're going to light up 5 of our stations by the end of this year, and we're investing in technology resources online, and that is an investment in both capital assets and human assets.
Well, I would have expected you all to say mobile, since at least I've been writing a bit about it. When we say mobile here, we're talking about broadcasting, the broadcast version of it, which is mobile DTV, they call it, where you would use a portion of your 6 megahertz channel to do a very rugged signal that you could receive just about anywhere on the go in the car. 3 of these, the 3 gentlemen here are all part of something called the Mobile Content Venture, which is a joint venture with NBC and Fox. They've gotten together to provide the service, and they promised like 2 channels of service in the top 20 markets this year, correct? Something like that. I'll go to Alan for this, give us the vision for that. What is that service actually going to look like when we see it later on this year?
Let me just say 2 things. One, the broadcast industry over 3 years ago, maybe close to 4, got together wide across the industry to develop standards.
07.
And,
Yep.
and we
07.
formed the OMVC, Open Mobile Video Coalition. And the point was we wanted to get together, all work together, so that we were all together as an industry, get manufacturers on board, and set the standards so that we could proceed in the mobile space. That was done 2 years before even the digital transition because we could see what was coming. That has been remarkably successful in a very short period of time. Briefly, we wanted to prevent what happened with the recorders like VHS and Beta, where there was a fight for 10 years over standards. We wanted a standard so that we could proceed and we could have a robust following so manufacturers felt good about all of us together. That succeeded. What we then found out was, we always knew was, that wasn't necessarily the business plan. So what we're working on now is what's the business plan. There's no answer to that as yet, but that's where we're going.
You can't describe what I'm going to see when I pick this service up, try to tune in at the end of the year?
Well, angels.
I'm sorry?
Case. Angels. A lot of good things happening.
Premature. Well, let me ask.
Previous trip.
Pardon?
It's going to be.
Is it going to be a?
It is not going to be simulcast.
It is not.
You know what we learned. Let me put this another way. What we learned when we went into the web, some people started, maybe many of us started, thinking we were going to take our stations and put our TV stations on the web. But in fact, it's viewers versus users. It's a different experience, it's a different media, and most of us have transitioned to doing different things on the web. That takes some time. So we're going to discover things that are appropriate for mobile and appropriate out there that will be a great service. So
this is not going to be it's going to be something new.
But it won't be niche content though, Harry. It will be mass programming like you watch today.
A linear channel?
What's that?
A linear advertiser supported
yes,
channel?
There'll be linear channels, but I think that's a great question because I think for people that perceive this is just another linear TV service. In the first generation it is, but the real potential of this industry for all broadcasters is that, when you think about this going out on devices now and those soon to be, tablets to come and those to be yet discovered, they'll all have an interactive return path through the internet. The ability to then innovate around whole new sets of consumer services will be incredible. So this standard was built with the idea that it's not just a linear service, although that's enormously important, as Alan says, because you're not going to be having 9 million people in a big city market watching a breaking news event on an LTE or WiMAX service without congesting that network. But there'll be a whole new set of, the device can be a DVR, it can have data services, so there's lots of different products that innovation will create around it once we get it launched.
Before I get to you, Colleen, do you have anything to add here, David?
Well, I think that we live in a society nationally and globally where people have mobile devices. They watch 35 hours individuals of TV each week, and there's an appetite to watch this mobily. And you have a device in your pocket now that will be adaptable, and you will want to watch television on the move. And my dream of this is that in the summer of 12, the Olympics from London will be consumed in great measure on mobile devices. And that will be a simulcast product.
I'm expecting it by Christmas, so.
That will be a seminal event where people will be outside. It's a summer event. The viewing levels will be extraordinarily high, and people will have an opportunity to watch the Olympic Games, and when we get to Rio in 16 to watch those events. Last year, people would have watched the World Cup on handheld devices outside in the summer had it been available. And I think our society is going to really accelerate toward mobile consumption of video.
Now, Alan was correct. The broadcasting industry came together several years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, in an extraordinary way through this Open Mobile Video Coalition. But then this year there was a little schism between the media, the mobile content venture, which is NBC, Fox, and 9 or 10 other groups, ION, and then the Pearl 9, correct? Of which 3 of those groups are represented here in Gannett, Post Newsweek, and Hearst. But there's everybody else, right? Everybody else in the industry was sort of left out of that club. So Colleen and some of the other groups got together and formed something they called the Mobile 500. Tell us about that, and how are you guys going to work together? Are you going to work together?
Well, just to back up and comment on Alan, as he described OMVC, I want to add my comments to Ann Shelley doing a remarkable job in herding a bunch of cats.
She is the Open Mobile.
She is the executive director of Open Mobile Video Coalition, and Brandon Burgess for leading a really difficult new initiative. But in our meetings, it was really evident that we couldn't get at the business issues without contradicting our charter. Our charter was really set up not to deal with money making and all of those things. And so as a result, every time the business committee tried to get together and work on things, we ran into lots of issues, as you can imagine. And out of that came the Pearl 9 group and MCV. But at the same time, out of that came, and perhaps at that time, a slightly different vision, if you will, on how this was going to work. And so Mobile 500 was formed. Mobile 500 is formed, and I have to say, by the way, as these things develop, things change, and just as you think you're apart, you're together on certain things. So while both of us are in parallel paths trying to sort out what the business model is, I think two of us is good competitive work toward finding a solution that's going to be a very consumer-friendly model. That's our hope. But the Mobile 500 was formed specifically to open the dialogue, to be inclusive to all broadcasters, including the non-commercial or public broadcasters. It specifically is meant to work with OMBC, and we certainly have worked in tandem with MCV to try to find out where we have common ground, where we don't have common ground. The common ground we're making, I think, a lot of progress on. Where we don't have common ground, I think most of it is in the category of we're still trying to figure it out. So I think we are working well together. I think we are achieving progress in solving what is right now a pretty complicated riddle. When you want to describe a consumer device, just as you think you've got it done, it changes, and that's been some of the challenge. In the Mobile 500, the devil's in the details from where we sit. What we have to be aware of as broadcasters in general are the issues of who controls the actual servers, who controls the information on that server, who has access to that information, who has the key, is it a third party? I mean, there's a whole bunch of technical issues that I really am not best equipped to address, other than to say the devil's in the details. And we just want to make sure that every broadcaster is asking those questions and are part of the discussion so we can try and get at what is the best consumer product.
Well, one of the important things here is that both NBC and Fox are participating in this, and that means that programming is going to be available to the consumers at the end of the year. So my question to you guys, what about ABC and CBS? Are they going to come in on this or what?
Yeah, I'll take that one. I mean, obviously, you know, the more the merrier, and I would say around all of the ecosystem, the conversations have been very positive with everybody that you would want in this venture. And I think when it comes to device manufacturers, chip makers, everybody, that this, you know, the reason the mobile content venture was formed was exactly this, to create a path to success on the business side. So, you know, I think obviously business discussions are private, so we're not going to sit here and talk about what may be going on with other vendors, but it's been very well received. And just to pick up on your question, Harry, this whole mobile content venture was always intended to create a path for the industry. As you know, when it started, and credit NBC and Fox for taking a real leadership position in this. But I think if you had asked them a couple of years ago, they would have said, you know, how are we going to work with the broadcast industry? It's kind of like herding cats. So the whole point was we had to create some type of initial plug and play. You can't create a business initially with 100 people and 100 sets of points of view. So this is to try to solve for that problem, to create a path. And I would say, if collectively you go back to when 2007, when the OMBC was formed, and you had said we would be at this point in time today in 2011, everybody would agree that is a success. And I think to your point about the Mobile 500 and other groups that are putting time into to mobile, I don't actually think there are very many differences, and I don't think they're competitive.
I want to invite anybody from the audience. I was trying to calculate among the four here how much of the industry they cover. I'm thinking about 25 or 30%. Would that be a pretty good guess? Total coverage of homes. So these are some pretty important groups. So if you have a question, go to the microphone and we'll get to you. Last September, stepping in for TVB, TV News Check surveyed a lot of broadcasters to see what kind of year you were going to have, what kind of year 2011 would be in terms of revenue. And what we came up with was that it would be a down year, 6% down, mostly because you don't have the big political advertising this year, but that the core business, that's everything with the political pulled out, would be up 3 or 4%. What do you think of those numbers? What do you think of those numbers?
I expect the core business will be up. And what we saw last year, separate and apart from political, in our case, 20 of our top 25 categories grew over 09. That was to be expected, but we should be able to carry that momentum forward to a degree in the year 11. And political is very targeted. We have states like California and Florida where we had an overwhelming amount of political. We had other states where it was de minimis. And those stations, absent political revenues of any significant size, still posted very significant gains in core advertising. That was the essence of what they had. I think that we see the automotive category recovering, and we'll see increased spending. If they sell 12.5 to 13 million units, that will help us really drive further recovery on the automotive side.
Do you think it can be positive overall this year? I mean,
well, I think some stations, some markets will be positive, probably from a
industry.
From a
talking
macro
about the,
point
not
of view,
talking about Hearst, but the
not.
industry. No.
Perhaps modest single-digit decline, but it doesn't have to be that way. I think last year what occurred is that we revalidated local television's ticket. I think there has been a migration back. People have played around with a lot of other advertising solutions and have found that none are as effective in terms of establishing brand awareness and lighten up the cash register in local markets as is local television. We aggregate the largest single audience segment in the marketplace, and there's great value in our advertising time. And in market after market, in our case, we see advertisers coming back around with respect to that. And I think we've got a fighting chance to be up modestly this year, even absent the political.
Oh, how about you, Colleen? What do you see for the industry?
Well, I think the industry is responsive to how the advertising fell in political. In some states, I know California, it spread much more throughout the year compared to other states where it really hit heavy in just a month or two. So it really depends on how the advertising fell. But overall, I'm with David. I think it's going to be in that same category of low to single digits down.
Okay. Anybody more or less?
Well, I totally, Harry, I wouldn't talk numbers for obvious reasons, but I think the trends are good. I mean, if you think about a year ago this month, right, I think the government was bailing out the big three. Somebody, maybe it was you saying last night, David, that there were barely any automotive ads in the Super Bowl a year ago. And today they're back. They weren't in the Olympics last year. So I think auto as a category is once again, a very positive development for the industry. And I think you're starting to see, last year a lot of that recovery came from the national side and the brand side, but I think you're starting to see a lot of growth at the local level, which is a good leading indicator both for our industry and the country as a whole. And I would just say I think the signs are positive. The other thing, as you relate to total revenue, remember that for a lot of groups, they are finally getting well-deserved alignment of audience and revenue when it comes to retransmission consent, and that's also a positive force in a lot of groups in terms of the bottom line.
Alan, are we going to see more political this year than you would have expected?
This year?
This year.
No.
Because of issue advertising and maybe early start to the presidential season?
In some markets you might.
He will.
I will.
He will.
Des Moines and New Hampshire.
Oh, right. But aside from the presidential, a lot of controversy at the state level, issue advertising. Have you any?
I think this will be the highest off-year election total that we've seen. I think that'll be the case for us and for the industry because I think both parties are going to take their message to their voters, even in an off-year election, and there'll be a lot of advocacy type political messages out there that will fall to local television.
I know this goes up and down, even and odd, but we could almost expect that we're going to get a number of record years, right? Given the Supreme Court decision, opened the doors and all the union and the corporate money. So 2012 for a presidential year might be record and so on and so on.
I think it's harder to predict the off year. I mean, unless you've got early primary states like David does, where I think you can count on it. When we look at our data, the issue money doesn't seem to follow all the patterns that you would. They're hard to predict sometimes.
I think you have to know your markets very closely, and I also think issue money does play out better in some states. They get things done through issues.
Harry, there's a lot of talk about the Constitution, and I have heard one proposal that I think is worthy of discussion, that we should change it so we have presidential elections yearly. I think we can accommodate that and be helpful. And
we got to smooth out those ups and downs.
Just an idea, Harry.
Just what the democracy needs.
I'm going to get to some programming questions because this is a programming convention, but let's take a question over here.
Hi, Larry Epstein from Drexel University in Philadelphia. I'm wondering about the revitalization of free over-the-air TV into the home, as opposed to through mobile, where you've said you're not just going to simulcast, but Any innovations that you see in terms of what you can do about four-network share in the home? Will retransmission fees make everybody fully healthy again, or are there some other strategies? Thank you.
Good question. David.
Well, I think retransmission consent fees certainly help make us healthier. If you go back 10 years, this was a very modest line in our income statements, and now it's a significant line. So I think some respects that's replaced network compensation. There are issues about how much that may have to be shared with the network, which undoubtedly Harry will get to. Our focus as a company is on continuing to invest in local news and use that local news platform to drive larger audiences into prime time. Last Thursday night in Boston, our 6 o'clock news had a 9.6 rating, and only American Idol was a higher rated show that whole market that night on the Fox station. In Sacramento, our Elliot Trushinsky's here last Thursday night, their 6 o'clock news had an 8.5. That was the third highest rated program, the entire market for the day. So, my belief is that there's a huge interest in these markets for localism and local news, and if we tell that story well, the audiences will gravitate to us, and we have had success as a company in leveraging our local news dominance in a lot of markets to over-index dramatically what the networks do.
Well, here would be my follow-up question and his question. Retrans is great. It's $1 billion, and I think you told me it might go to 15 or 20% of your total revenues in a few years. But will that number rise fast enough to save the big event programming for broadcasting? I wrote about the loss, having to watch the college football championship on ESPN this year. I think that's a terrible thing for broadcasting when Fox loses. In the Final Four, I'm a big college basketball fan. Starting in 2016, we're going to lose every other year we're going to lose the finals on CBS. A lot of other things I think are vulnerable. We could lose NFL playoffs maybe, or the Masters, things like this. If we don't have enough money to hang on to these things. David?
Well, I think that's what's been good about the last couple of years, Harry, because really the issue hasn't been that there couldn't be that revenue stream for broadcasters and the networks. It's just that many of the networks had chosen to express the value of their own stations to build cable assets, which may have been a rational reason at the time, but the collateral damage of that is that then when 2009 came around, that revenue stream wasn't there when the networks were completely advertising focused, as in ourselves. But I do think what you've seen happen with Fox and CBS in the last couple of years, and now I think the other networks as well, is that they're aggressively going after that revenue stream, and rightfully so. So to preempt and head off your question, our view of it is, I don't mind that the networks are having conversations with us about sharing in that revenue, because together we need to build that revenue stream. We need them to invest in that programming. To your point, it's irrational in our view for a 6-rated game on ESPN to be more profitable than an 18-rated game on broadcasting, because revenue should follow audience, and I think there's now starting to be the alignment that's necessary. There's some catch-up to be done. But I wholeheartedly agree with you.
Well, maybe someday we can take some of these back.
Well, notably, let me just add quickly that NBC agreed with its affiliates not to migrate sports to other cable platforms for a period of years. Yes, we'll see, but it is look you in the eye and agree to that understanding. We shall see.
And I also think, Harry, that there is a recognition among the networks that event programming is more and more important to them as well. That it is something that really draws in viewers and helps them promote across. We've all known that, but they've recognized it more and more.
The mistake will be, I believe, on the network's part, and I think there's different points of view, but I think if the network treats every broadcaster the same, every station, as a single distribution point, and doesn't make distinctions between because we all know some stations bring WDIV brings a tremendous amount of value to NBC in Detroit. WCVB brings a tremendous amount of value, as does Como in Seattle, to ABC. And I think if the networks were to treat everything monolithically, just a distribution channel, that would be to their own detriment.
I think
But I don't
they-
think
I think
all
they've
the,
got that.
I don't
think
think all
they
the
got it.
networks are thinking that way.
Yeah. Question here?
Hi, my name is Marco with Newview. My question is, with the trend of all the manufacturers of television sets coming out now with their own IPTV platforms and providing channels of all sorts of content, are you guys, for example, I didn't hear anyone discussing investing in IPTV technology to provide your content directly to the manufacturers' TV screens and cutting out the cable providers and providing your content, possibly to a national consumer who's interested in content from one city who lives in another? And what about licensing rights for that?
Anybody want to talk to that? Colleen?
I understand those conversations are going on. I don't think any of us would comment on whether or not we're having those conversations, but I do know those conversations are taking place in the industry.
And I'd say they're in addition to. I don't think we want to stop providing our programming to a cable, satellite, or telco distributor, but to the extent that there's a bona fide way to supplement in addition to, I think that's got to be part of everyone's strategy.
I always felt that if you don't do it, somebody's going to do it to you, like this Ivy outfit, who's taken a lot of broadcast signal, put them on the internet and streaming them out there for
in violation of copyright law.
Well, we haven't had a ruling on that, have we? We'll see.
We will.
We'll see.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Another question there?
Brad from the University of Mississippi. We know that one of the bedrock audiences for broadcasting has been that older audience. And we know that's an audience that continues to get bigger. What happens to them in this world of mobile TV and social media? What are you doing to reach out to them, if anything? Or are you just kind of, I hate to use the phrase writing them off, but what are you doing?
To the younger or to the older audience?
The older audience.
Well, I'll take a shot at that one. I mean, I think the fact there was a good piece out earlier this week, I forget in which publication, I mean, that quote-unquote older audience, let's say 55 to 65, is the biggest, I think, population demographic in the country and does some of the most consuming. So there's some more alignment we need to get, I think, with the advertising side around that. Presumably some of that will change. But to your other point about mobile and social media, I think sometimes we make the mistake of thinking that new media tools are all in the hands of younger people. Well, you look at Facebook, you look at social networking, I mean, pretty soon that becomes mass. And, I knew the day my 84-year-old mother was sending me viral videos that it was no longer just some young person's thing. So that audience has a lot of the same new media behavior patterns as the younger audience, except they also remain very loyal to the linear broadcast that we put out on our main stations.
We only have a few more minutes here, and I do want to talk a little bit about the syndication business. There are really only 2 or 3 shows here for you to sort through here to consider for 2011 first-run shows. Is this business going to come back? Are we going to get back to the old days? Or do we want to get back to the old days where, the big studios would bring you 10, 12 shows to look at? Do we want to get back there, or are we in the business of local news and local programming again?
I think everything's cyclical, but in spite of what we think, nothing ever goes back quite the way it was. Things change. Syndication is very important for the future. Syndication is very important for those of us who pride being local, because it gives us another way to help create personality, help create who we are. Wheel of Fortune is important in Detroit. It's important in Miami. It's important wherever it plays. And it's a local show. It's owned by that station. And people understand that. People appreciate that. So to have a good, strong personality that comes through syndication is very important for local stations and will be important. The number of syndicators, how they operate, that's cyclical, that changes. It won't be like it used to be, but
you think it could come back halfway to where it was?
The challenge for every industry, not just ours, is innovation.
Yes.
Right.
And we're in an industry that's 50, 60 years old, and we've got to continue to invest. So we've got an environment that stimulates innovation. We're seeing more of that in the local news side, perhaps, than we are elsewhere. I believe Steve Burke and the guys that repopulate NBC Entertainment are going to try and invest in innovative programming, and that's going to be enormously important to us.
And I also, I'm sorry, go ahead.
The reality, though, and people should understand, in our case, and I said this when we were public, about 40+% of our revenues are derived from local news, about 25 to 30% from network programming, and the rest from syndicated programming. So the investment has got to take into mind what those revenue-generating opportunities are. But if we have any message to the syndicators that are here is, drive innovation, invest in creativity, and
so bring us the shows.
Well, and what I was going to add is, now more than ever, there's a great need. There's multi-platform opportunities. There's multi-channels that many of us are programming, some more successfully than others, that you can preempt or you can put some of this creative programming on. The challenge is in that invention and reinvention of new ideas and fresh product, and how can it work? And I'm not sure today's or the old adage, if it doesn't clear New York, Chicago, and LA, it doesn't clear the country. I'm wondering if these days you might see more regional products out there that would be viable, that many of us would be interested in. So I'm optimistic in programming and thinking there's a lot of opportunity.
Are you willing to pay the big cash fees?
Well, Harry, I think that just with Dave and Colleen's point, we need innovation from the programming industry. I think that frankly, there's still that big ticket model out in Hollywood with a high-paid producer living in Beverly Hills. I think we need to change the business model. If you look at daytime on all the television stations represented by this group and people in the room, we're distributed to 100% of the homes. It's an enormous opportunity to create product and monetize. The problem, I think, is if we continue to just try to monetize it as I produce a program, sell it to you, and we both share in the revenue that comes from selling 30-second ads in a somewhat deflationary inventory world, that's not a future. Now, the flip side is, whoever at American Idol came up with the idea to say, vote on your AT&T phone, okay? I mean, we may go back and look 30 years from now to say that was the crude early version of interactive TV, but that was an enormous moneymaker for AT&T and Fox. To the consumer, it was content. We need a generation of programmers now to innovate around creating programming that has interactivity to it, where transactions can be made directly by the consumer, but it's got to be elegant content woven into the product, not sales-driven,
or gratuitous.
Yeah. But I'm confident there are those ideas out there. But I would hope that
and you'll pay for them if they're.
Yeah, in fact, I think everybody on this panel would love to see pitches like that. Even iVillage did not a success, right? And it was a big failure for NBC, but one could argue that on paper, right, it was an execution issue, but the idea itself may not have been so off.
Okay, we're getting flagged here. I just want to say that Rentrack and TV News Check are sponsoring a cocktail party in the back somewhere. I guess through those back doors, over to the
right.
Over to the right here. Or they're pointing over there. I guess both ways there. So please join us for a cocktail or refreshment, and join me in thanking our panel.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join us for a post-panel reception sponsored by Rentrack Corporation and TV News Check.